The words that matter most in football are sometimes the shortest. One sentence from a manager, one signature on a piece of paper, and suddenly seasons, reputations, plans are rewritten. In the space of a breath, Spain's coach handed Lamine Yamal a burden and a promise when he declared the teenager going to make history. A phrase that caught fire across social feeds and pundit rooms and forced everyone to look at an 18-year-old differently. That sentence is not cheerleading. It is a field marker laid down before the game has even started. The kind of public faith that lifts expectation and raises questions. How to protect a prodigy from the glare. How to turn raw brilliance into sustained greatness. And whether the national setup can give him breathing room to grow while the world points. At club level, the ripple met the rock. Barcelona quietly moved to trigger a €25 million release clause to bring Joan north from Espanyol. A concrete, ledger-friendly piece of business that ends speculation and begins a new internal conversation about who stands between the sticks. For a club famed for cultivating attack and controlling games through midfield, investing in a younger, high-potential goalkeeper is both insurance and a statement. It signals a readiness to think long-term, but also creates an immediate selection puzzle. Was this a shrewd market window read, a reactive bargain because the clause was there, or the start of an internal power shift in a dressing room that already hums with outsized personalities? The activation of that clause was procedural, but its outcome, who plays, who learns, who leaves, will be anything but bureaucratic. Put these two developments side by side and you see the shape of a narrative that runs from La Masia corridors to international dressing rooms. An 18-year-old winger carving out Ballon d'Or chatter and a 24-year-old keeper crossing a city divide for a sum that vexed watchers who had been following Espanyol's timing and the club's contracts. In practical terms, Spain's coaching staff must reconcile the euphoria around Yamal with the prudence the coach himself urged, developing people before footballers, while also weighing the emerging crop of keepers who now jostle for a finite number of spots in De La Fuente's thinking. Selection is not only about form, it's psychology, balance, and managing locker room dynamics. A shout-out like the coach's lengthens the list of eyes on Yamal. Barcelona's goalkeeping coup intensifies scrutiny on who will be trusted in big knockout moments. There are technical edges to the debate too. Yamal's game, explosive, inventive, willing to gamble on the final pass, invites a tactical blueprint, built around his verticality and timing. And Spain must decide whether to open tactical allowances for a teenage talisman or to nudge him into a more tempered role that protects his consistency. On the other hand, Barcelona's new acquisition forces the club to consider distribution, sweeper-keeper demands, and continuity with a goalkeeper room that has had long-standing hierarchies. If Barcelona wants to press higher and play from the back, the new keeper must adapt. If the club is protecting a young backline, minutes will be rationed. Each scenario feeds into the national team. Coaches watch minutes, choices, temperament. The club's gamble becomes the national team's homework. Beyond the pitch, the ripples touch markets and narratives. A €25 million clause executed rather than negotiated is a reminder of how clauses shape transfer strategy, rewarding decisiveness and punishing delay. It also reframes Espanyol's calculus. Had Joan been called up earlier by Spain, his release terms might have shifted, and the economics would look different. Meanwhile, every time a manager places a young player on a pedestal, the commercial world leans closer. Brands make notes, and the Ballon d'Or conversation, once purely sporting, begins to map onto sponsorships, legacy talk, and expectation economics. For viewers, the immediate product is drama. Who starts for Spain? Who gets the gloves at the Camp Nou? And which headlines will stick when the coach reads his September list? So, what should we watch next? First, listen to how the coaching staff balances praise with restraint. Words will indicate intent. Second, monitor minutes. Does Yamal's role expand or is it carefully curated? Third, keep an eye on the keeper rotation at Barcelona. When a new signing arrives, the clock on everyone else starts ticking. And finally, watch the first squad announcements ahead of the World Cup qualifying window. Those names will tell us whether the coach is prioritizing immediate impact or long-term cultivation. In the end, football spins on small decisions. A sentence that makes history possible. A clause that rewrites opportunity. And in those decisions, the story of a season, and perhaps a generation, is waiting to be written.